Today's lecture is all about infinitives, apposition, and demonstrative pronouns. Let's begin by looking at infinitives. Here's a bullet point summary introducing you to infinitives. First up, an infinitive is a verbal noun. That means that it will refer to an action, like any verb, but syntactically it is a noun and it will behave like a noun. In English, infinitives usually begin with to walk, to stand, etc. For Hebrew, infinitives show no inflection whatsoever. They don't inflect for person, gender, or number. There's only one infinitive form, which is really, really good news. And finally, the default way to form an infinitive is to have the three root consonants and give it an uh-oh vowel pattern. A shva followed by a cholam. But this isn't the lecture about how to derive the infinitive form. This is more about the functions of the infinitive. So there are four main functions of an infinitive that I'll introduce you today. I won't always give the infinitive to do whatever translation in English. There's not necessarily a one-to-one correspondence between these two languages, but I want you to understand that syntactically the infinitive is acting like a noun. And like any noun, it can be the subject of the verb, as in number 1. I'll read it. Lo tov hayot ha'adam levado. Not good, and what is not good? The man being alone. This whole phrase, introduced by the infinitive, is the subject of what is not good. Or the infinitive can be the object of the verb, as in number 2. Hine lo yadati daber. Behold, I do not know to speak. Daber, for speaking, is the object of the verb yadati, what I don't know how to do. Or number 3, the infinitive can provide the purpose of the verb. Lizboach ladonai bati. To sacrifice to Yahweh I have come. The reason I came is to sacrifice. And notice here the infinitive is preceded by the prefix preposition la, so the infinitive is the object of the preposition, just like any noun would be. And here this prepositional phrase with the infinitive is the purpose of the verb, the reason why this person came. All right, so to recap before I explain number 4, number 1, the infinitive can be the subject of the verb. Number 2, it can be the object of the verb. 3, it can provide the purpose of the verb. Or number 4, it can explain the verb. Chatatem la'asot hara be'enei Adonai. You all sinned by doing the evil in the eyes of Yahweh. Now, these last two functions of the infinitive, purpose and explanation, usually they'll be preceded by a la preposition, but not always. You could have that function with just a bare infinitive, but usually you're going to see the prefix preposition la. And next, apposition. Apposition is when you have two nouns or two clauses that stand side by side, and the second one explains, restates the first one. For example, I could say my wife, Marissa, where in English when we write this out, usually you have a comma between the two nouns that are in apposition, and the comma communicates namely. So my one wife, namely Marissa. Now this whole thing about two nouns staying side by side, they could be in apposition. This is actually different from what I told you a few weeks ago, that when you notice two nouns standing side by side, assume a smichut. Remember what a smichut is how you state of relationships between two nouns. So how do you say in Hebrew the gold of the king when Hebrew doesn't have a word for of? Hebrew binds these two nouns together. Zehav ha-melech. And when it binds the two nouns together, usually you have initial vowel reduction in the bound word. So one way to recognize a smichut is recognizing that you have a bound word. Remember, free is the flashcard form that you have memorized. Bound is the first word in a smichut. So you can have initial vowel reduction like here, a shva and a patach. You can have syllable reduction 2 instead of 3. Here is vowel reduction again, but you won't always get vowel reduction. Here it's spelled the same. You can recognize a bound word by vowel reduction or by suffix change. So tsereyod is a unique plural suffix for a plural bound word, or patach tav is a unique suffix for a singular bound form. Now, I said back then, 2 nouns side by side, assume a smichut. Here's the more complex story. The more complex story is there are actually 3 options for 2 nouns that stand side by side. First, it could be a smichut, or it could be a verbless clause, or the 2 nouns could be an apposition. I'll give an example of each and explain more as we go here. Number 5 is an example where the 2 nouns side by side are a smichut. I'll read it. Ele Shemot HaGiborim. You could recognize Shemot and Giborim as forming a smichut because there's initial vowel reduction here, a shva instead of a tsere, but perhaps you don't recognize that. The way to know is if these 2 nouns are not synonyms, if they refer to distinct entities, then they form an of relationship. So these are the names of the warriors. Now, this whole business about whether or not they're synonyms helps greatly, because number 6 is an example of a verbless clause. Vechol anasheha giborim, where anashim and giborim are synonyms. Gibor is just a specific kind of ish. And all her men are warriors. Her here referring back to Ir. And number 7 is similar. Ken Nimrod Gibor, like Nimrod, a warrior, where now Nimrod and warrior are in apposition. They're also synonyms. Nimrod, a person's name, and he's a warrior. So, how do you recognize whether you have a smichut? If the 2 nouns side by side are not synonyms, it's a smichut. If they are synonyms, then it could either be a verbless clause or the 2 nouns could be in apposition. And only context will tell you. Actually, in order to be definitive, we would have to look at more context than what I've given you in 6 and 7. All right, this whole thing about 2 nouns side by side, are they in apposition or do they form a smichut? This actually makes sense of all of these forms for the numbers that we saw a few weeks ago. Remember, number 1 is syntactically an adjective, so there's only one form, and it works like an adjective where it always occurs after the noun it modifies and the article agrees. 2 through 10 are nouns. And whenever you say 2 of something, there are actually 3 different ways that you could say it, or 3 of something, etc. You could use the free form shnaim, and then it would be in apposition to the noun that it modifies. Shnei is the bound form, and then it would form a smichut with the noun that it modifies. Let's say you use shnei susim. Shnei has to occur first because it's the bound word. And translation literally would be 2 of horses, but you just say 2 horses. Now, when they're in apposition, so if you use a free form, then the number and the noun can be in either way. So shnaim susim and susim shnaim both mean 2 horses. Literally, it would be 2, namely horses, or horses, namely 2 of them. So this is the one exception to the rule that I just gave you. If you have 2 nouns side by side, if they're not synonyms, it's a smichut. If they are synonyms, then it's either a verbless clause or it's apposition. Here's where actually you can get both varieties, apposition or smichut, with the same 2 nouns. But here, it doesn't matter whether you recognize it as apposition or smichut. You would translate each one of these as 2 horses. And finally, the demonstrative pronouns. Hebrew is like English in having a full set of near and far demonstratives. You'd use a near demonstrative if you're referring to something next to you, this thing or these things right by me. You use a far demonstrative if you're referring to something far away from you, like across the room, that something or those things. You already know your Hebrew near demonstratives, ze, zot, for singular things, ele for plural things that are close to you. The far demonstratives are actually identical in form to the subject pronouns. Hebrew just recycles the third-person subject pronouns to do the other duty of far demonstratives. So who as a far demonstrative refers to that masculine singular thing, he, that feminine singular thing, hem, those masculine plural things, henna, those feminine plural things. So no new forms to memorize. That's good news. The bad news is now we've got the same form with a double function. So how do demonstratives function? There are two functions of a demonstrative. Either the demonstrative describes the noun or it takes the place of a noun. When a demonstrative describes a noun, it will always have the article and it will always occur after the noun, like an attributive adjective. Number 8, asita et hadavar hazeh, where ze has the article and occurs after the noun, so it's describing the noun. So you, a man, did this thing. Or number 9, same thing, min ha'anashim hahem, or here we have hem with the article, so we actually know with the article that it's not the subject pronoun, it's a far demonstrative, and it's describing the noun because it's also after. So from those men. The other function is that the demonstrative could take the place of a noun, and in this case, it will never have the article, and it can occur anywhere in a sentence. Ele v'nei Cham. These are the sons of Ham. And another occurrence of a demonstrative taking the place of a noun, ma zot asita lanu. What is this that you have done to us? So that's the points for today. Far demonstratives recycle the third person subject pronouns. Two functions of a demonstrative, whether near or far. A demonstrative can describe a noun. If so, it will always have the article and it will always occur after the noun. Or the demonstrative can take the place of a noun and it will never have the article and it can occur anywhere in a sentence.